Can you just imagine you sit down on the bus? There's a newspaper headline. It's a newspaper headline. Somebody's reading big, bold, capital letters. Heroin addiction is at a 10-year high. Heroin's making a big, big comeback in the city where you live. And the person sitting next to you on the bus says, look at that headline. Isn't that a shame? You know, what seems to me so sad is these young people these days, they're using heroin imported all the way from Afghanistan. They're using heroin from Myanmar and these far off countries. And you know, back when I was a kid, people used to use heroin that they grew right here in their own backyards. You look at this person like, what? What is wrong with you? How can you possibly think that the problem with heroin, like what it is you're complaining about, is that it's imported from far away, that it would somehow be okay as if it were, I don't know, organic and locally grown heroin? If you're sitting around and talking to people about, let's just say it's even a friend of yours or an acquaintance, you know somebody who's just been killed by a hitman. So somebody, maybe you don't know who it is. You just read the newspaper headline. Somebody paid somebody to kill someone you know. And this guy sitting next to you on the bus, this member of the public at large, says to you, you know, it's a shame. Young people these days, they're employing hitmen. They're paying for murder from people from Chicago, people from New York City. You know, back when I was your age, we used to pay hitmen from right here at home. You think, what is the matter with you? How can you think that the ethical issue here is how local or how far away the killer is or who you paid to do this act of violence? Either you think this is morally questionable, this is morally wrong, because of the act itself, in and of itself. Either you think it's morally wrong in both cases, whether you hire someone from Chicago, someone from New York City, or someone from right here in the city we're having this conversation, or else you don't really think it's immoral at all. It's not really conceivable that distance is the factor here that changes something from being good to bad or from being evil to being indifferent. And yet this is the excuse we hear all the time if we're vegans, especially if we're vegans in the public eye, especially for me here on YouTube. So I just got this question again. You guys have heard it in different forms. Somebody named Tom wrote into me saying, you know, how can food possibly be ethical when it's flown in plastic packaging? So let me get this straight. You think that strawberries, if they turn up at your grocery store in a plastic container, you think it's ethical. So it's completely identical. The plastic container is the same. Strawberries are basically the same. But strawberries that are grown locally, those are ethical. And the strawberries from further away, those are unethical. That's your position, right? So you can't recognize the difference ethically between the pieces of an animal's corpse and people telling you they think raising these animals in captivity and killing these animals to chop up the pieces of the corpse. People who think the animal product is unethical, regardless of whether it's here, Mexico, Chicago, Sri Lanka, Japan, doesn't matter where it happens, that the product is unethical, the process of raising the animal and killing the animal is unethical. There are ecological factors here that may also be unethical. You can't recognize the difference between a piece of meat in plastic packaging and a bowl of strawberries in plastic packaging, because for you, what really matters is the distance, is whether or not it's local. It's this locally made meat is somehow morally good and meat from far away is immoral. That's your perspective. And that's so important that you can't recognize any of the other issues that vegans are raising or talking about. One precludes you from thinking clearly about the other. It's really that big a deal. So look, guys, this is a little bit different depending on what country you're living in around the world. Let's say you have a friend who's got to go for heart surgery. Heart surgery, pretty common. This friend says to you, well, you know, the hospital downtown here, the hospital just walking distance. I hear it's a bad hospital. I hear it's dirty. I hear they keep having complaints from the government inspector that they're violating the health code, that's not sanitary. I hear the doctors take bribes. I hear some of the doctors kind of had some controversies where they almost lost their license. And, you know, I heard a bunch of people died there due to medical malpractice and incompetence with heart surgery. But you know what? It's a local hospital. It's the closest hospital. Therefore, it's the most ethical choice. So that's where I'm going to go and have my heart surgery. You say, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? If you think this is something you need to do, if you think heart surgery is important for you, is something you want to do, why wouldn't you consider taking a trip on a bus or by truck or by train or by airplane to get heart surgery somewhere else, to get the best heart surgery you can possibly get? Maybe in another country, maybe another city. Why would a local hospital be ethically superior to a hospital far away? And it's the same thing with this question about meat, people. Why would a local slaughterhouse be better than a slaughterhouse that's far away? It just does not make sense. Now, the only other aspect here, and some of you guys hear this and some of you don't, from good old Tom, you know, is like the idea that plastic is so evil. Plastic is of such overwhelming moral significance that the strawberries are wrapped in plastic, that there's really no difference he can recognize between package of strawberries, package of pork, beef, whatever. Okay. I've only talked to one person who believed this, and that was my daughter at 5 years old. So she didn't think that at 4 years old. Just lately, I assume her mom was lecturing her about some source like that. Maybe it was her mom, maybe it was a school teacher. Someone had told her that, oh, no. Buying plastic is really bad, and like somehow buying plastic is more of an issue than buying meat or dairy. And I asked her why. This is trying to be educational, trying to use some Socratic method. Well, okay, so why do you think this? And the answer was, if you use plastic, it ends up in the ocean. It ends up floating in the ocean. So maybe in school, maybe sitting with her mom watching YouTube, she'd seen some vivid images of this plastic garbage floating in the ocean. So, plastic can end up in the ocean if you throw it in the ocean, right? If you put it in a hole, in a dump, in a landfill, if you throw it in the garbage in other ways, there's no way it can end up in the ocean. But I said this too. I said, riddle me this. What is it that's special about plastic? So I know something else that floats in the ocean. She's only 5 years old. She says, what? I said, wood. Pieces of wood can float in the ocean. Have you seen that? And, she'd seen that in a movie or video or something. Oh, yeah, right. Logs float in the ocean, pieces of wood. So would you tell me that you never want to use wood again? That wood is immoral because wood can be thrown out and float in the ocean? Wood can be thrown in the ocean. Plastic may be thrown in the ocean. But there's no coherent argument here to refuse to use plastic. It isn't an ethical distinction that makes sense. Guys, I commented on Twitter earlier today. The end point of the gay rights movement the end point, the objective of transgender rights, transgender movement, it ultimately has to be that the whole world regards being gay as boring, not as special, not as wonderful, not as great, not as outstanding, but as just boring. Already in a country like Thailand and Laos, very few countries are like this. Already in Thailand, a man dressed up like a woman who goes grocery shopping, like at a big box grocery store, is just ignored. It's just boring. It's just normal. Nobody asks about it. Nobody's surprised. People who are dressing as the gender other than the one they were born as. It's just become boring in Thailand. It's just normal. The only reason why it's edgy and shocking is because of a type of intolerance that one way or another you're looking at disappearing. And the process of that kind of intolerance disappearing is going to be very different in Seattle than it is in Saudi Arabia. Those are the big questions nobody really wants to talk about. What's going to happen in Saudi Arabia? What's going to happen in Indonesia? These are the real struggles for acceptance of homosexuality. It's not really the situation that we have so much to worry about in moving Seattle closer to Thailand, but hey, we can ask those questions too. The process we're going through with veganism. At some point, veganism has to cease to be shocking. Veganism has to cease to be surprising. It has to cease to be special. I mentioned this before. I have a friend getting a PhD in classical philosophy, so Greek and Latin. I think mostly Latin. I forget what she's doing these days. And she said she had a form to fill out for a conference. So it's some kind of academic classical philosophy conference for people attending the conference. And there was a check mark. There was dietary restrictions other than vegan. Such a large percentage of people in this field or at this conference were going to be vegan anyway. They didn't ask you if you were vegan or not. They assumed you were vegan. And then they asked you just like, are you allergic to peanuts? Or like, is there something else beyond merely being vegan? I was like, wow, I've never seen that. Never heard of that in my life. As hard as it may be for you to imagine, if you're caught up in a political discourse where being transgender is shocking or edgy or outrageous, you have to take a step back and not see the edginess and outrageousness as the point of the movement or as the objective or characteristic of the movement, right? That's not something essential to the rights you're seeking, the political position you're advocating for. That's something inessential created by the context of the people around you being shocked or disturbed or intolerant, what have you, right? It's a question how you move forward from there. And I mean, for us as vegans, can we imagine a world where we don't get this kind of comment on the internet or to us or us face to face, where we don't get told, how dare you refuse to eat meat when you are guilty of buying strawberries imported from a foreign land?